quite excited by sharing this next presentation because it's something that I've never talked about before. Authority content is something that I've been doing lots of thinking about. What I'm going to share with you now is the framework that I go through when I consult with someone. So this is a foundation that I apply to every business, and then we try and customize it based on the situation. So this, for me, is a very clear way to map out for someone what they should be doing over the next 6 to 12 months. And what we try and do is identify the opportunities, understand the objectives that they're trying to do for the business, and create a map for them, and then basically prioritize the order in which they should tackle these tasks to get them the biggest bang for their buck. So the whole purpose of this session, because I've never done it in such a large group before, I want to go through and facilitate you going through as though we were having a consulting session. So we'll go through at the different stages. I'll get you to ask the questions. I'll map out the way that the strategy works, and then you'll be able to walk away with a map, a one-page marketing plan that you'll be able to implement, and fits like a glove for if you want to lay out authority content over the top, but it's not necessarily needed either. Like, this is just what I consider marketing 101, things that every business should have in place. Now, I tried to make it like a framework that is broad enough that it can encompass just about all situations. So I've done a lot of thinking around this, having done this same process with hundreds of companies. I've come from it from all different angles, so the foundations are solid enough, but you need to make the adjustments and tweak based on your individual circumstances and your unique situation. Everybody is a little bit different. I actually found this in the stock market niche. I told you I used to be in the stock market niche, and when people first get interested in the stock market, they go on the search for what's called the Holy Grail. And the Holy Grail is this perfect trading system that will tell them when to buy, how much they should be buying, and when to sell. And it does all the thinking for them, almost like it could be automated, and it'll pick the exact bottom of the market, it'll pick the exact top of the market, and they'll basically be able to lie on a beach, somewhere in the Caribbean, pressing a button occasionally and having large amounts of money deposited into their bank account with very little or no work. Now, that's what these new traders go looking for, and I saw a few shaking of the heads there. Obviously, that system doesn't exist. There is no super easy way to do this. And what people learn when they start trading over time is that the way that you should approach this is find a model, potentially if you're brand new, find a system that resonates with you from an expert or an authority. So you like pieces of what it is that they've done because they've already done the thinking and they'll get you 80% of the way there. But then what really makes the Holy Grail work for you is then that final 20% you customize and make it your own. It's very important to tweak it to make it your own because then you take ownership for the success or failure of that particular system. Otherwise, people, they go on the search for the Holy Grail, they go find these different gurus, they buy all of these different trading systems and courses and things like that, and then they implement them, at least they think they implement them to the way that the expert or authority has described them. Then if they don't get the result that they were hoping, then it's very easy for them to blame the guru or the expert. It didn't work because of their system. It's very disempowering, and you'll never actually find the Holy Grail if it's keeping on being someone else's fault that it's not working. And I found it's the same with business. You want to find systems and processes, kind of like authority content, or what I'm about to go through now, and you want to understand the framework, but then I'm going to give you the framework, and then you've got to customize it and model it for your own situation. So that way you take ownership of the success or failure, and it also enables you to adjust your sale as the winds start to change. Because in business, the winds are changing direction all the time, and they feel like they're changing more often than not. Like before, the direction of the wind was heading in Google organic search and people were making that work. But unless you could adjust your sale after that opportunity disappeared, then you're in trouble. So it's very important to understand the methodology so that you can customize it and change with the situation. So I'm going to give you the system for the way that we market businesses. But every business is different. Every situation is different. I'll give you the framework and then you'll customize and make it your own. And what it is a collection of lessons that I've learned in all of the different businesses that I've been involved in. every business that I start or get involved in, I make new distinctions and get new insights and learnings about what I feel works and what I don't. And then that enables me for each new business that I get involved in to navigate through and make it a success much quicker. So one of the very first businesses that I looked at starting when I left school, so that was back in 1999, I hopped online and I looked for top inventions of 1999. And I found a website that listed out all of these products that were getting developed over in the States. And then my plan was to contact some of these inventions, try and acquire the distribution rights for here in Australia, and then sell it into Australia. So I came across this idea of this drink spike detector, because I'd just come out from school, so I thought, well, I've got an in there. I can work with the schools to try and see if I can do some education around, spiking of drinks and that sort of thing. And I discussed getting the rights and buying a whole bunch of these, and my thought was I would then approach schools, see if I could put on little education seminars, put the fear of, your child might have their drink being spiked into the parents, and then have the parents buy these little cards to give to their kids when they go out. So that was my thinking. So I purchased the drink cards, had them sitting at home, and then started to do my outreach to see what I could learn. Now, the first thing that I learned is that schools, government organisations move incredibly slowly. There's a lot of bureaucracy around there, and something like a sensitive matter like, drugs, takes a lot to get it through. So one of the first lessons I picked up now when I start businesses, and that's why I like to own the asset, I like to have full control over businesses that I work with, is because I found I was just hitting these roadblocks with these big bureaucratic organisations that weren't moving or accepting what I want, and I couldn't really see a way to get past that. So that was one of my first lessons. These days now, I avoid businesses that deal in that space. Now, does that mean that there aren't opportunities in that space that people can take advantage of and it can work for them? Of course. These are just the lessons that I've learned that help me to navigate. That's not to say that that's right or wrong and there's exceptions to every single rule, but I just want you to understand some of the lessons that I learned along the way. The other lesson I learned in this process was it's better to sell a product or a service if the person is actively looking for the solution to a particular problem they have, or they have a problem. I don't want to have to educate someone to let them know that, hey, you've got a problem, now you should get a solution, and my product is the solution. Because that education process, it's quite expensive, it's quite time-consuming. So again, now I try and look for businesses where people are already actively seeking out solutions to problems that they already have. Now, this is just one of the businesses. This is just a couple of the learnings. You have to understand, as someone matures in business and picks up all of these different learnings, it will give them biases, different ways on what works and what doesn't. So you need to take what I talk about and then apply it with your model of the world and what you experience to be true. Pick out the bits that resonate with you and then customize and make it your own. But every business that I've gone through, I've collected these little insights, and that's what I'm going to share with you now and put it into a plan. So what we're going to actually talk through is just some very quick fundamentals. Now, I'll move through the fundamentals reasonably quick because I think most of the people in here already have established businesses. So talking about identifying the target market, talking about selecting the product or the service, you might already be pretty far down the rabbit hole, and it might be hard for you to completely re-engineer your business. But I'll give you some insights for what I look for. So if you start businesses further down the line, or it might also give you some insight as to why you might be having some hurdles or coming up against some roadblocks. And what I like to do when I start a business is, if we can stack the deck in our favour and increase the likelihood of it being successful by making the right decisions up front, then that's a good thing, because then it just makes that whole process easier. But again, that doesn't mean that if a criteria I mention your business doesn't meet, then that doesn't necessarily mean that your business isn't going to work because it didn't meet Dave's criteria. Does that kind of make sense? Yeah. Okay, so let's drill into the fundamentals. So the fundamentals, the first thing we need to think about is around the target market. For me, for a target market, and I have a list of questions when I start consulting with someone, and I ask them questions about their business. Some of these questions is what I'm going to walk you through right now, but one of the first ones is around target market, and I get them to explain their target market. I want them to be large in number. So I want to know that the niche is big enough that there's a good number of people that we can sell our products and services to. I want to know that they're easily contactable. So I want to make sure there's a way that I can actually get my message in front of them. I want to make sure that they want what it is that they have. Like that was the lesson that I learned from the drug spike test product, was I want to make sure that they have a problem, they know they've got a problem, and they're looking for that solution, because that's a better place to be. And it's also, you want to make sure that they have money as well. So you don't want to target the university student and try and sell them a home study course on how they can save better. Like, yes, you might be able to make it work, but you're kind of going up against these fundamentals where, well, they probably don't have money to purchase what it is that you're selling. So you're already starting a little bit behind the eight ball, which means you have to do even more to motivate them to make a buying decision. So again, thinking about that target market is up front is very important. And for us, one of the other businesses I was involved in, we used to run a rock and roll clothing music store. It was called Planet 13. We actually modelled it off a business in the States called Hot Topic, for anyone who goes over to the States. And we wanted to replicate that model over here. We started it down in Victoria and we got it up to 3 stores. We built it like a franchise. So we had all the processes and procedures all documented with this idea of rolling out this rock and roll clothing music store. You know, we were selling t-shirts, AC/DC, Metallica, Misfits, those sorts of things, stickers, patches, all that sort of stuff. And we set up that business, and when we're thinking about our target market, we realised that our target market really wasn't the kids. Although we needed to appeal to the kids didn't have any money, and the money that would get given to the kids was coming from the parents. So we needed to make a store that was attractive to a parent to go, I'm happy for my kid to go there, and I'm happy to buy gift vouchers, and I'm happy to send them there. So we made some conscious decisions about opening the store in shopping centres. We decided not to sell t-shirts with, swear words and things across it. We didn't want to sell any drug-related paraphernalia. And there were a few other things like that where we're kind of like, that's not going to appeal to the target market of the parent, because we wanted to make this scalable. Cut a long story short, that business, we ended up closing down. Traditional bricks and mortar business, the rag trade, is a tough game. You've got a lot of overhead expenses, and we were finding that we were much more efficient running the online side of the business, so we ended up closing the retail stores down kind of when the GFC hit. That's an aside, but again, every business I get involved in, I learn different lessons along the way. The other lesson that I learned from that Planet 13 was when it came to opening up the franchise store, the first franchise that we sold, we opened the store on Elizabeth Street, right near Flinders Street Station in Melbourne. And the reason we did that is, well, the way I got the store was pretty cool, actually. I wrote out these little letters that basically said, are you looking to get out of your lease? Because we would be interested in assuming your lease. And then we went and put that underneath all of the doors around some of the businesses in the area, because I thought if, the rents at that point were sky high, and if I could get into someone who already had a long-term lease that wanted out, I could probably get the business quite cheaply, or assume their lease because they just wanted to get out. We actually ended up getting a store that was a CD store, record store, and they were kind of struggling, going out of business. So I got onto their lease that already had a couple of year options. And the reason I went for the Elizabeth Street store right near Flinders Street Station was because our target market, the kids, and also obviously the parents attached to those kids, were heavily in that area. Like the kids who would go into our store, the emos with the hair down, and the punkers, the rockers, they were all sitting on Flinders Street steps. And I thought, if we could get an awesome rent, so our overheads were probably as low as they were going to be, and if it was right in front of the target market, if I couldn't make the model work there, then it's probably not going to be able to scale. So that's another lesson. If ever you're going to test anything, and as we go through this, you always want to think about who's your exact perfect target market, and let's create some marketing that very specifically speaks to them And if you can't sell them first, you're going to have no chance trying to sell these people other target markets that might be slightly outside of your sweet spot. You'll see a little bit more of that as we progress. But what you need to do now is just think a little bit about your target market. Again, I want large in number, easily contactable. Are they actually looking for what it is that you're selling, and do they have money? The next thing, it's that idea of having a product that solves a specific problem. I don't want to be re-educating the marketplace. And I think the product needs to be solid. I love products that, for lack of a better word, does exactly what it says on the tin. Like I want to, if I'm selling something, I want that product to deliver the result that the client or the prospect is looking for. These are the fundamentals. You need to make sure that you've got a good product or service, because we're a very transparent world. People talk online, social media, things get spread very, very quickly. So you've got to be selling something that's quality. So that's another, again, these are just fundamentals. If you haven't got that, then we need to get something else in place. The next thing that I do, so we talk to them about their target market, we make sure that they've got a good product and I have a deep understanding of their product. Then we start to do a little bit of a stock take on their business. I love to see what assets a business already has, because we might be able to very quickly leverage those assets. Maybe they've got a whole bunch of content. Maybe they've got a very large database. Maybe they've got a very unique story. What are those assets within their business that they might not have even recognized as assets that we might be able to help to customize our marketing plan as we develop it, which might get them a result even quicker? What's that competitive advantage as well? You have to think in terms of what the strengths and weaknesses are for a business. We just worked with a stockbroking firm in Melbourne, and Alpha Broking, and they have some different products that might go head-to-head with someone like CommSec or one of the big banks that provide a trading platform. It doesn't make sense for them to go head-to-head against CommSec and some of these big brokerage firms. So we needed to think about, well, what's their competitive advantage? They're a value-add brokerage firm. We needed to demonstrate that they were boutique. We needed to demonstrate that being small enough they could provide the unique service. We needed to bring personality into the business where the big corporates didn't have that personality. That's one of the things about small companies. That's one of the best advantages you've got, is bringing that personality in, because that helps you to differentiate and separate yourselves from the other competition. So again, at this point, we're doing a little bit of a stock take. Target market needs to be a good match. We need to make sure that the product is good, and then I look for what opportunities do they have as I do this stock take. So in your head, I would be thinking, and some of the things you might write down at this point, some of those other decisions might have already been made, but you could start to think about what assets do you have. I think during the break, I was chatting with a lady who runs, was it a trucking company? Where was that one? Yeah, the lady up the front, a trucking magazine. So she's sitting on a lot of content from all of the previous issues of the trucking magazine. So for me, the opportunity or the asset that will help guide our one-page marketing plan is you're sitting on that content. So how can we leverage that content that you've already done? So that's why every situation is a little bit unique, and I'll give you the framework, but things like that, you're going to have to either get some outside insight or try and reach that conclusion yourself. But looking for the assets that you've already got oftentimes can yield the quickest result. So now, we talked a little bit about the fundamentals. I want to move into this one-page marketing plan. And this is what I draw out for most clients, and you'll be able to do the same. And this is the start of the one-page plan. So I would draw it as we go if I was in your shoes. So the first thing that we need to think about, or the way that I think about it, is around the traffic. How do people become aware of your business? There's probably a few different types of traffic sources, and I'll just put them into some big buckets here. It might be traffic that you own. It might be traffic that you borrow. It could be traffic that you generate organically. It could be traffic that you pay for. Now, owned traffic. What is owned traffic? Traffic that you actually own and have control over might be something like emailing your database. At the drop of a hat, you can drive traffic to a specific offer or something based on the idea that you have that asset that you can mail. Borrowed traffic, that is where you might do a joint venture or an endorsed mailing, or you're working with another business and they can introduce your products or services over to their clients. Then we've got organic. Organic is things like, typically speaking, you're putting time and energy into, let's say, search engine optimization, SEO for Google. It's free in the sense of the word that you don't have to pull out your credit card, but it also takes your time, so it's not really free. You still have to do work with it. Organic could also be your social media activity. You're out there, it's free, you can hop on Twitter, Facebook, whatever, post your different content, try and engage your audience. Again, organic traffic. Now, the purpose of this slide is to help you to understand one important thing that we will come to later. Really, out of the only form of traffic we've got that is actually scalable, like how do you very quickly scale your own database? You're going to have to go out and spend money to acquire that database. If you're joint venturing with someone, there's probably only so many relationships that you can do. If you're building organic SEO, sometimes someone comes to me and goes, hey, organic SEO is delivering fantastic results for me. I want to double the budget that I give to you to see if we can get the result. Does that mean you can double the traffic? And I'm like, no, it doesn't necessarily work like that. It's not like the relationship that way. So it's less scalable. Owned, borrowed, and organic traffic don't have that scale. Whereas paid traffic, things like AdWords, paying for ads on Facebook, YouTube, if you're doing offline specific advertising, that is more scalable. So the takeaway here, and we'll come back to it a little bit later, while we might start with owned, borrowed, and organic, and we don't want to forget about them, longer term, to scale your business, the game is you need to be able to pay for traffic. If you can get to a point where you know, I'm happy to spend $50 to acquire a lead because I know I can convert 1 out of 3 people and then I can make a sale and I can still end up being profitable. Then we can start to turn on much more amounts of traffic, and we then start to test all of these different paid methods as long as I can acquire a lead at a price lower than I'm happy to pay to acquire them, like that $50 or whatever. Excuse me. So just so you understand, that's probably just something to park in your brain. There's a few different types. I think you should have all of them firing. And we'll talk about some of the different traffic methods, and you'll need to find ones that you resonate with more. For example, you're sitting on a mountain of content, so SEO for you would be one of the ones that float to the top. You'll probably choose 2 or 3. It might depend on the assets that you're already sitting on. And then that will help you determine which traffic source you're going to go for. So if we talk about what some of these traffic sources are, let's draw some of these up here. And I'll just pick a few because there's so many different traffic sources. What are some of the different traffic sources we talked about? Okay, so we've got SEO, we've got social, and for social we've got both organic, plus also we've got paid. We've got things like we've got AdWords. You've got video, YouTube. You've got, I'll just do YouTube. We've got offline mailing. We've got JVs. Like there's lots of different forms of traffic. And the first thing I would do is when you design your one-page marketing plan is to start to think about some of these traffic sources, which makes sense for you. List them all out for now, and you might have some other ones that bubble up. Think about what is already working in your business now. List out those traffic sources because we can maybe probably do them a little bit better. If you don't have anything, is there anything that you have a bias towards or something that you know a little bit about? Who knows, maybe you're an AdWords guru or you've got a cousin who does AdWords really well. Okay, well that might be one of your strategies. But the aim of the game really is we need to have multiple traffic sources. We need to prove 1 or 2. We'll go after the one that's going to give you the best chance of success first. But over time, we need to build multiple traffic sources so you're never single source dependent. You know, the algorithm change that happens by Google that then kills that traffic source. I mean, ultimately, we need to get to making sure that paid traffic works for us because paid traffic is much more scalable. That's where we're getting to. But we might need some stepping stones to get there as we're learning about our business. So I'd love to hear, just yell out, are there traffic sources that you know that you're already doing that are currently working for you now? Just yell them out, just so we kind of get some other traffic sources. How do people get business? Referrals, that's another one I didn't put in there. What other traffic sources? Pay per lead, yep. So you can do stuff on Facebook. I know they've got the pay per lead, and there's other different ways you can do that. There's also banner advertisement. Like, there's a whole bunch of different traffic sources. Any other ones? Think about your best traffic source at the moment, how people get to know you. What is that? Let's start with that, just so I know what it is. You want to just... Facebook, what else? Best traffic sources? Networking, yep. Email marketing. Oh, was that Scott? Was that you out there? Who said that one? Oh, up the back there, yep. Signage, yep. So for walk-by traffic and stuff like that, or on your car or whatever, yep. Yep. Attending different events and things like that. So you've all got your own different traffic sources. As part of the consulting session, what I do is I figure out, well, what's already working for you. That's the best place to start, always. How do we magnify where you're already getting results? Have we optimized as best as we can? A lot of people focus on their weakness and try and pull that up. You're better off when it comes to traffic, figuring out where you're already strong, make sure that you're doing that the best that you can, and then move on to another traffic source. Does that make sense? Question just up there. Yep, I might even repeat it.
Like, works well. You can't really scale word of mouth quickly.
Yep.
Or sort of expand it quickly.
Agreed.
How would you know which way to go in terms of paid?
Yeah, so the question being, because I know I missed it right at the start, if referrals are working really well for you and it's not necessarily very quickly scalable, how do we know which other traffic source to select? So a couple of things. One, you might look at how can we get even more out of what's working? How do we make referrals work better? Maybe there's a way you can incentivize it. Maybe there's a better way that you can track it. There's probably a few things you could do first. That's the first thing I'd think of. Then where do I go next? It'll depend on things like, are there any other traffic sources that are working for you? If you say no, then okay, the next thing is, are there anything where you've got a bias, where you go, well, I already know a little bit about SEO, or I've just read Dave's authority content book. Okay, well, I'll apply that strategy. Find a strategy that resonates with you and learn more and apply that one. Find someone who's making it work. Take what they're doing, learn as much of it as you can, customize it and make it your own. So you take ownership of it. Does that make sense? And then over time, you'll just build these traffic sources. So then you'll get multiple traffic streams. Make sense? Yep. So the next thing is, once we start to get these traffic sources, we need to think about where the traffic is going to go. So it's going to go to some sort of opt-in magnet. So we'll just draw that here. Let's just call this opt-in. Now the opt-in magnet, think about, you've got these different traffic sources. What is the best, most attractive offer that you can make to your prospects to let them get to know you better? Maybe, here's some examples. I mean, I give away a website authority checklist, a 20-point checklist on how to improve your website. We're working with a gym, and they give away the first free class. Compass Pools, they've got a few different call to actions, but they give away their Magalog. You need to have something for the browsers, people who aren't quite ready to make a purchasing decision, a way for them to opt in and have an ongoing discussion with them so you can help to position yourself and get them to bond to you. So every business, I think, needs some form of offer. Where do you start? Start with your perfect target market. Just like I opened up our store on Elizabeth Street in Flinders Street, Elizabeth Street in the city, because I knew that's exactly where my target market were. These opt-in magnets, you want to speak very clearly to one specific, perfect target market, the person who is most likely to convert for you. So you need to do some thinking around that. Now, we have to start somewhere. You'll come up with one opt-in. Over time, you might actually come up with different opt-ins based on different verticals that you're going after. But let's just start with one that's got the biggest chance of success. So yeah, it could be an audio, it could be a video, it could be a PDF. Something that I've just fallen in love with at the moment are quizzes, and I'll show you some quizzes at the moment because I think they're a great way to get people started. And there's the quiz master up the back there who's taught me everything I know about quizzes. So you just need to find something. It's not enough these days to create Like, people don't want to opt in for another newsletter. How many websites do you go to that says, sign up to our free newsletter to get updates and tips on what we're doing? Who's seen those? How many people, who wants another sign up, another email in their inbox of some gaff that I'm just signing up and I don't even really know what I'm getting? Nobody wants those. No one's signing up for those. You have to be very specific with your offer. Think about the conversation that's going on in the head of your target market just prior to them making a purchasing decision. Create a bit of content that answers that question and then require that they exchange their name and email address to get access to that piece of content. That gets them into the front of your funnel. Now, later on, we might drive, the paid traffic, AdWords, we might drive straight to that opt-in. Depends on the traffic source. Some traffic sources, we actually point straight to the opt-in. Other traffic sources, they'll land deeper in the site, and we'll talk about that in a moment. But think in your business what that opt-in might be. For our video production business, we use Leads Hook. And again, the gentleman up the back, Nick, who can tell you more about that, but I've not seen a quiz software like it. It's amazing. What we do is when someone visits my video production business, oftentimes the question that's going on in their head is they want a quote as quickly as possible, but they don't want to chat with anyone because they think if they start chatting with someone, it's going to be a salesperson and it's going to be a hard close, all that sort of thing. So I know that conversation is going on in their head anyway. So I have created what feels like, I'm going to get to the result of knowing how much the video is going to cost me without actually having to chat with anyone. And it's very easy. What type of video am I starting with? Okay, and there's a series of about 10 questions that I ask. Then they get to the end of that sequence. They're already so far down the rabbit hole. I say to them, great, we've got all the information that we need to customize the quote for you. We'll just grab a few more details and then one of the team will get in contact with you. So it's a great way for them to get started, and then that gets them into my funnel, and we can also call them up. Another client of ours, Bazinga, they've worked with us for a really long time. They're very good at this. They have created a free guide. They're an app development company, and they've created an app, a report here, 5 simple and quick steps to validate your app idea. So if someone is looking for an app development company, and they come across some content, this is really attractive for them. Of course, I want to validate whether or not my idea makes sense. Not only that, once you get good at this, over time, they've developed out multiple different opt-ins targeting very different target markets depending on where they are in the buying cycle. So they've got also things like, do you need funding? Well, that would be another question that's going on in some target market's head. So over time, we have to start with one, but over time, they've started to build out multiple opt-in offers. And they're going after very specific verticals for these, or very specific target markets. But for us, if you don't have one, you've got to start somewhere. So let's start with the one that's got the biggest chance of success. Does that kind of make sense? Just to get a little bit of an idea, who has some sort of offer or opt-in reason that someone might want to exchange their name and email address? You want to put your hand up? Yep. Now, when you think about those offers, is it, hey, sign up for my newsletter and tips, or is it a very specific, here's the problem I know you've got, and here's the solution that I'm providing for you in, a video or an audio, whatever it does. It doesn't really matter what it is. But just so I get a little bit of an idea of those, okay, so there's a few there, which is good. And once you get that, now what we can do is look at how do we drive, assuming this is attractive enough an offer, we can then look at how do we drive traffic sources to that. And then we can figure out, well, at what cost do I acquire this lead for? Does that make sense? So things to start thinking about. The next thing, once they opt in, is we need to think about a bonding sequence. So at this point, someone has now exchanged and giving me their name and email. Now, when someone comes to your website, oftentimes it can be a little bit like drinking from a fire hose. When you go to a website and there's 50 million different pages and, maybe your website's the same. I know you've got 700 articles, I think you were saying. Like, the chances of someone landing on your site and then consuming all of that content in one go is nil. No one's going to get there and read it all through. And there's lots of things probably. You might have spent time building up your About Us page. You might have spent time building up your case studies. You might have spent time writing up about your different products and all those sorts of things. But when someone gets to your website for the first time, they're probably not going to be able to consume all of that information in one go. So what we want to do is use a bonding sequence as a way to drip feed that content to someone over here. So I'll just call this, because we're small bit of paper, I'm just going to call it AR, so autoresponder. And what you do is we would create a series of emails that might go over, 1 month, 2 months, 3 months. It depends on the business and how long the buying cycle is. But in this email, what we would do is drip feed the content that was living on your website. So it might be in the first email, what do you think we send them? The opt-in magnet that they signed up for. What's the second email? Well, the second email might be something like, hey, the web's a pretty anonymous place. Most people hide behind their websites. We like to do things a little bit differently, so I'd love you to go check out our About Us page where we tell you more about the business and why we do what we do. Then the next email after that might be, hey, we get a whole range of different clients approach us, and sometimes we find the best way for someone to know whether or not we can help them is to listen to the experience someone else has had working with us. So we have recorded and placed a whole bunch of case studies on our page over here. And then maybe another email might be, hey, we've got this fantastic article that we created, and it's done really, really well, and it answers the top 5 questions that you need to know when you're purchasing a swimming pool. Go check out this. So what you do is you list out things that bond the prospect to you to help elevate your authority, help them consume the content on the page, and let them, you build the story now because they're listening to your message around why they should work with you. And then afterwards, once we're a few in and we've built a bit of trust, we might even make them an offer. Hey, go buy our product and service. Go whatever. Now, we first create this as an autoresponder sequence, and then on top of that, we then broadcast mail over the top. So how often do we send these emails out? Again, depends on the industry. We just worked with a psychologist in Melbourne, and he said when people are looking for psychological help and they want to get a counselling session, usually they make a decision within the first week. So he mails quite heavily within that first week, whereas something like the swimming pool manufacturer, much longer buying cycle. So we can drip that content out over a longer period of time. But what we do is we have the set core bonding sequence, and then we broadcast relevant content that's going on in the market right now over the top of this. So this might be topical news. This might be things that are going on in your business. It might reference something that's just happened in the media. But the whole purpose of this broadcast over the top is to give the bonding sequence the feel that it's not canned messages. Because if you're interspersing things that are currently going on in the media right now, that makes the rest of these emails feel like they're relevant and topical and happening right now, and it's not some canned sequence. Does that make sense? Yep. So what I would think about doing now, as we move through this, we first identified some different traffic sources. Then we started to think about what your opt-in is. Now what we want to do is start to think about what are some of these emails that will go into this sequence. And then we move on to the next thing, which is the website. We'll just call this web. Now, on your website, you might have a few certain key pages. So I think all websites, there's certain things, and this is just a screenshot of melbourneseoservices.com. That's where you can find out more about us, and I try to be the best example of what it is that we teach, so you can always go there. Anything that I talk about, you will find reference and examples on my site, because that's the way we roll. We lead by example. And the things that you want to have on your site, you should have an About Us page, you should have reviews, you should probably have a blog, you should have easy contact information. Like for me, some of this is just 101 when it comes to building a good website that's modern, optimized, responsive, gives Google what they want. If you haven't updated your website in the past probably 3 or 5 years, it's probably time to rebuild your website. Just to make sure it's hitting all of these content pieces. I think that's very important to have, those different elements, because those elements will feed into this autoresponder sequence here. Because effectively what we're doing is we're pointing from these emails then back down to certain ones here. So as these go out, I'm pushing them back to the site, getting them engaged, and then I'm going to try and channel that up into the next level down to try and, again, continue and further the discussion. Now, it's no secret, I love videos. So I would be thinking about putting as many videos on all of these different pages as possible as well, because I think it's a great way to have people bond and connect with you. For me, the two biggies are video. You want to do as much video as you can. And for me, I'm always collecting the proof. So case studies, photos, any sort of industry recognition, all of that sort of stuff. Always be on the lookout for how it is that you're building that proof within your business. And then what I would look at doing for your website as well, make sure that you optimize your website as best as you can for what Google is looking for. So we know Google now looks for user experience, so make your website have a fantastic user experience. Make sure that it's easy for people to find things. Make sure that there's lots of information there. Make sure that there's easily contactable information. There's some of those things that we mentioned in the Google leaked quality guidelines that I was talking about. You want to feed those things back into your website, because whether or not you decide that SEO is going to be one of your main traffic sources or not is irrelevant. What Google is looking for is a good user experience. So regardless of how you're driving traffic, it will benefit you to have your website as well optimized for Google as possible, because that will help any sort of traffic that you're already getting. So you should bring your website up to, at minimum, not even necessarily ongoing SEO, but you should make sure you're meeting Google's best practices and you do some of the real basics, making sure you're submitted to the main directories, do some basic link building, a few things like that. I would consider that, for me, 101. And if we look at increasing usability, increasing conversion rate, that has other effects elsewhere as well. Because even AdWords, Google looks at the site quality score. If you've got a low site quality score, they tend to charge you more per click. So if you've got a very poor performing website that's slow loading and it provides a really bad user experience, Google is going to be charging you, I suppose for lack of a better word, numpty tax. They see you as a bit of a numpty, so they're going to charge you more per click to get that traffic. So again, there's a lot of benefit for making sure that your website is as tight as it can be. It'll help to increase traffic and work on, it flows through all of the different traffic sources. And yeah, obviously I'm a little bit biased with video, but I still believe that's the low-hanging fruit. And it was good to see Steve incentivize that to make sure that you all get your first video going. Now, the presentation, and I don't want it to hold up because I've still got a bit more to go. If you want the 20-point checklist that covers off things like what are the key pages, if you want to have a look at the type of content you should be putting on the site, the videos, I created a 20-point checklist, and you can get it at melbourneseoservices.com/SEO-report. You just go there and I will give you a checklist. You don't even need to work with us. Go take that checklist, give it to your web developer and say, make sure that our website ticks every one of these boxes. That, for me, is probably what you do for the setup. So as you write that down, melbourneseoservices.com/SEO-report. So next piece of the puzzle we need to think about is now your blog. So let's do a blog over here. Now, if you imagine the pages that I've talked about here, they are your top tier pages that are probably going to be in your top navigation, right? The next type of pages I'm talking about is your blog content or general content. Oftentimes you bury it a little bit deeper on your website. So you might have a page and then underneath that then links through to other content. Now this content down here is the content that might be your authority content. This is the content that you wouldn't necessarily link to it directly from your menu, but they'd get to it from a blog or a content page. You can see here the Compass Pools one just here. It's not necessarily on a blog, but it connects all of these deeper articles down here which target longer tail keywords. Now, this type of content is the stuff that you will be amplifying through paid media like social media, Facebook, whatever. You might run some ads to specific bits of content here. It could be content that appears organically in SEO as we start to rank for long tail keywords, those sorts of things. So you have a blog and we start to build out the content down here. Again, if you don't have a content strategy, you don't really have an SEO strategy these days. And really now, I actually don't think you don't have a digital strategy unless you have some form of content. Content is so important because it's at the pointy end of when your prospects get to know you. It's usually the first bit of something that they engage with you. You know, they read an article, they watch a video, they do something. That's the first impression. So I think you need to have a strategy to be creating content. And that can end up living on the blog. And then you can also, here in your autoresponder sequence over here, you would point to the top performing articles. As you start to share this content, you might go, wow, this video here gets, or this post here gets 10x the number of views as these other ones. Perfect. And it's getting so much more engagement. Well, that would be perfect to add into this autoresponder sequence. Cool. I think you're starting to get this. Good example, again, of this is Bazinga. They're a great client. I find with us now, the clients that get the best results are the ones that are proactive, that take the advice, that implement, that are content creators. And these guys are machines, and they do it incredibly well. So they're creating long-tail content and they share this content on social media. What they actually do is they post this, they figure out which pieces of content get people to resonate with them and engagement. Then they take it to Facebook and then they boost that content. Then they drop a pixel for anyone who engages in that content. And then they run ads to anyone who engaged in that content. They make specific offers for these opt-ins because they know the person's engaged in the article, therefore they're probably going to be interested in the opt-in, and then they run ads to them. That might be a little bit too quick for some, but when you watch the video back, you'll go, wow, that Dave guy's pretty smart. Okay, so we'll just in jest. Okay, I will come back to the one-page map because we're going to keep building that out and you'll be doing it. But I just want to talk in terms of levels of ready. So if we think of it in terms of, kind of where people are at in the buying cycle. So depending on when people engage with you, there are going to really be three types of people. Some people, they're not quite ready to do business with you just yet. They might still be browsing. For those people, we make the opt-in offer. And we're just getting them to give a name and email or some way that we can have an ongoing conversation. So for those people, that would be a great example of what Bazinga's done. For some reason, not all the graphic is showing, but there's actually a name, email field just above that, download free now. For some reason, it's not showing up on the screen. But that addresses one type of person who is where they're at right now. There's another type of person that is ready to buy right now. They've already done their research, they've already looked at what's around, and they want to do business with you, or they want to just pick up the phone and chat with someone. So for those people, we address them as well. We make sure we've got very clearly visible contact us information. We say call us now, all those sort of things. So we've got the person who is still browsing, and then we've got the person over here which is ready to buy. And there's someone just in the middle here that they might not be ready to buy because they've got questions. And what we do here for those people in the middle is you might have a discovery session or a consult session. You could pitch it as a free 30-minute session with one of the team to answer your questions. Now, that doesn't work for every single business, but if you were doing renovations or something like that, it might make sense. It's probably not going to work for the cafe to say, yes, before you come in for a coffee, let's book in for a 30-minute consult. Just question. There you go. You could make it a 30-minute tasting session. So it is about taking the framework. I almost feel like you should get a book for that. Because it's about taking the framework and then customizing it to your situation. I'll give you the big rocks and then you kind of figure out what's going to work best for you. So the middle people might be some sort of discovery session. All right, so with that in mind, the way that I do it on Melbourne SEO Services, we have the strategy session that you can book in for. So the strategy session then appears down here. We'll call that strategy. Okay, so what now actually happens, we might make call to actions within here. Maybe one of our first offers is to book in for a consult down here. We also think about where people are in the buying cycle and always think, what is the next step in the process that I should get them to do? So if they land on, let's say they landed on a blog from search engine optimization. So they've done a search on Google and they land here. What do you think would be the offer, the call to action that I make at the bottom of this blog post? It's the first time they've ever engaged with us. So let's say at the bottom of your article and maybe in the sidebar, what would the offer be? Yeah, I would go for the opt-in because they're already on your website. So I would take them back to the opt-in. Because then once they get in the opt-in, we can have the discussion and continue to drip feed. Let's say that they've already opted in and I know they're on the list. Where should I take them next? The discovery session. So now I start to make my offers if I know they're on the list to the discovery session. So you always think about what's next to keep moving them down that cycle. And then down the bottom, we've got our, you've got your product or your service down here. So I'll just call it product for now. And then the product, obviously from the strategy session, we're trying to sell them into the product or the service. Now I like to, here, it doesn't always work, but I like to have a low-priced offer and I like to have a high-priced offer. So the low-priced offer, if they contact me and they say, Dave, I want to get a web video done, and I say, great, that's $2,000, and they say, well, we don't have that budget, I want to be able to downsell them to the home study version. It depends on the business, like that's more of a service. Let's say you've got a shop that sells suits. What you might do is your low-priced offer might be cufflinks. And you sell cufflinks because you know if someone buys cufflinks, then they're probably interested in buying suits. So you think about the business. I think the point I'm trying to get across here is to try and have, where you can, different price points or to test to make it easier for someone to start with you. That's just, again, it may need to be customized depending on your business. Certain businesses that may or may not apply, but generally speaking, after that strategy session, we push them into the product. And then the final bit over the top of this is what I would call remarketing. Now, who knows what remarketing is? Okay, a couple in the room. Remarketing is basically, have you ever had that feeling where a website feels like it's following you around the web? You visit that one website, maybe it's, adrenaline.com.au used to do it to me quite a lot, or lastminute.com.au, where you visit their website and then it feels like they start following you around the web everywhere. You start to see ads on Facebook, you start to see pre-roll YouTube ads, you're on other websites, you start to see their ads showing up. Sometimes if they don't know what they're doing and they push the boundary too far, it feels a little bit like they're stalking you. But if done correctly, and you alter the frequency rate so you don't overdo it, that is a very effective way. Because what might have happened is someone might be in the browsing phase, and they didn't quite get to opt in for your opt-in magnet because, one of their kids was screaming and they needed to hop up and, they just left the website and they thought, I'll come back to that later. But then they forget what your website is. And they go back to Google and they type something else and now they land on someone else's website and they've forgotten about you. So a lot of times, it's not that they didn't want to purchase your products and service, it's just life got in the way and they never got around to it. So one of the most cost-effective forms of marketing is advertising back to people who you know have already engaged with your brand. And it's a great way. So we do remarketing mainly through 3 channels. We do it through the Google AdWords program, which runs through the Google Display Network. We do it through YouTube, which is the pre-roll ads, and we also do it on Facebook. So someone visits our website, we drop a cookie and tag them, that person leaves, then they start to see our ad appearing other places. And then where do you think I try and target them? Once I know they've been to the website, what ads, where do you think I'm sending those ads? Opt-in. Yes, perfect. You're getting it exactly right. Because that's the next point in the cycle. Yeah, exactly right. Now you can do some fancy stuff as well depending on the volume of traffic and stuff like that. Once they've opted in, you could actually run remarketing ads that push through to the strategy session because you could add a tag when they land on the thank you page that takes them off that list and then you only run ads to whatever that next step is. Got a little bit fancy there. You might have to listen to that again later. But that's kind of like that next level. Now, trust in the process, for me, I would consider this 101. Like, this is the first thing that I try and do with every consulting business that we try and work with. It's just a framework. You have to customize it for your situation, and everybody's got different stages, but let's think about the flow here. So the flow, you will have different traffic sources. You will have to pick the ones that make most sense for you. Some you will already have in place. That traffic may point down to your opt-in, or it might also, SEO, it's going to point all the way down to some blog posts and things like that. So some of these different socials will point to different parts on your website. But the whole aim of the game is the traffic source drives to get them to do an opt-in. So I can have an ongoing discussion with them. Once that ongoing discussion happens, I then have an automated sequence over here, which helps the person bond with me. I then broadcast over the top of that to make it appear more natural and more current, and have call to actions to get them back to the website engaging in the content. Once they're engaging in the content down here, I'm trying to push to either a strategy session, or if it doesn't make sense, we push straight to the sale. And then we layer remarketing over the top of it, so anyone who engages in this at any point and they don't take the next step, we continue to market to them. Now, once I do this, I feel like that's most websites are leaky buckets. I feel like by doing this, we've plugged most of the holes. Now, for me, I'm happy to go out and spend money on AdWords, because I know if I'm spending my top dollar, because AdWords is expensive, it's a very efficient market, and it will deliver you great leads, but if you're not capturing them here, and then you've spent $100 to get a click or whatever industry you're in, and then they leak, then that's a very expensive way. Whereas if we tighten this funnel up here, we at least try and capitalize and make the best effort to convert that paid traffic. Once we get there, as we talked about before, paid traffic is very scalable. So if I then can calculate out how much a lead is worth to me, then I can start testing all of these different paid traffic sources, and I'm looking for paid traffic sources that can deliver me leads at a cost lower than something that's acceptable for me to be buying a lead. So we run a video production company. Generating leads off AdWords is quite expensive. It costs us about $150 to get a phone call, and then we're probably converting about 1 in 3. So it's costing me around $450 to get a closed lead. Now, if we're selling a video for $19.95, $2,000, then cost of goods is probably at least a third of that. Then we've got our overhead expenses. Once you start thinking at this level, it makes it much easier for me to scale my business, because I know what my costs are. I know how much I'm acquiring a lead for. Now I can crank that traffic for any time that I can acquire a lead at less than $150, and I can test other paid sources. Does that kind of make sense? A little bit. So that's kind of ultimately where you want to get to. Whenever I sit with a client, I start off, I think about their target market, I think about their product, I think about their assets. Their assets sometimes will dictate which part of the strategy and the flow that we end up going for. And then I will try and prioritize and help them prioritize how to build this out. And this is kind of like a one-page marketing plan. Something that might take them 6 months, 12 months to implement. And we have different levels. Someone will have a consult with me first. Some people will just say, hey, Dave, that sounds great. I've got the different connections and assets. I can pull this all together. And they'll have consults with me once every 6 months or once every quarter. And we check back in on their plan and see how they're going. Other people, we do this plan and they say, hey, Dave, I need you to do it for me. Can you SEO my website? Can you make some videos? Can you roll out the autoresponder sequence? Yep, we can do that. It always just comes down to budget and objectives. It depends on how large the business is and if it makes sense for you to pay to get someone to do it. If you're a micro business, hiring us to do the job, you might not have that budget. So we've got the home study versions. And then there might be other people that go, yep, that just makes sense. We get it. We just want you to do it so we can just focus on what we do best. We're great at delivering blue widgets, so I'm going to focus on blue widgets. You focus on the marketing. That's kind of what I want you to take away from this is you need to build out your plan like this so you know what the end picture looks like. Then you can go backwards and then we can figure out in what order you'll build this. And that's what I'll help you do now. And then that becomes your strategy on how to develop. But that's basically what people pay me $1,000 a session to do what I just did there. So I hope you value it. Question just up there. I don't know if we wait for a microphone. Is that a good idea? No, that's all right. I think that's the first time anyone's actually said that. So that's all right. There we go.
Just to add, what we're finding is we're a reasonably small player. Like for us, it's either us or say Toyota or something like that. So it's a massive brand name, and then there's us. So we're trying to use using remarketing as a tool for branding, more so than trying to drive sales. So that once people have come to the website, that they're getting smashed by Bailey's ads no matter where they go. So it creates a sense of, holy shit, this company is actually pretty
bigger
big
than they
and it's
are.
not so
Yep.
bad. And then we're also using your autoresponder sequences and everything else as a part of the post-sales.
Excellent.
In the same way of trying to create, rather than just have like a raving fan out of one of every 100, we're trying to stay in contact and keep up to date and continually post really cool information and content to them, so that then we've got a much higher rate of raving fans.
You're going to get a book.
Because then they start talking, and then that helps the word of mouth and raises our profile.
Yeah,
So
perfect.
it's the same idea, just a different way and a different outcome.
And all I've really done here, I've only shown you stage one. Most businesses, you are the exception rather than the rule. Most people haven't even come close to designing something like this. Once you get this in place, yes, then we look for where is the next lowest hanging fruit. Typically, tapping into past clients that you've already sold to is a great place to start, because you know they already know, like, and trust you. You've already delivered the result. What else can we sell to them if you've got a repeat product that they will continue to purchase? Or how can we enable them to become raving fans to recommend more people in, to use the referral strategy and things like that? So it just depends. This really, for me, is just level one. Most people don't have this, but I would class this as marketing online 101. Get that in place, and then we go, all right, let's now move it to the next level, which is what you're talking about now. The next level is the post sequence. Yep. Yep. And then once you do that, so once you've then got your back end, then you need to start to learn about your numbers, and then traffic, when you buy it, is scalable. So then you start to tip the traffic in here, you know your numbers all the way through, and then the aim of the game becomes, how can we just keep buying that traffic to scale? You need to make sure you've got systems and processes in place so you scale and you don't break the business. So that's when things like System Hub come into play, and you need SOPs and make sure that you can scale, and it's not that you're a one-man band, and if we scaled very quickly, you'd break. So you kind of build for that scale, but when you grow a business, I've got this framework, the 4 stages of entrepreneurship, and depending on where you are, you've got different objectives at the 4 stages. So the startup entrepreneur, they've got lots of ideas, they're still testing things out, they haven't quite figured out exactly who their target market is, what exactly they're selling. So at that stage, they need to figure that out. Once they figure that out, they move to the proven entrepreneur. Now, the proven entrepreneur, they know who they're selling to, they know what it is that they're selling. Now what they need to do is collect as much proof as they can that they can deliver that result consistently, and oftentimes at that point, the entrepreneur, they're still very hands-on, they're still very much delivering and working with all of the different clients. Then you move to the next level, which is the systems entrepreneur. That's when you take everything that you've learned up until that point, and then you build systems and processes around you, and you start to plug other team members in to deliver to the standard that you're happy with that enables you to scale. Most business owners struggle to move from level 2 to level 3. They get stuck in the middle because all of the skills that they learnt in levels 1 and 2 oftentimes hold them back from moving to level 3. Because in 1 and 2, you needed to be across everything. You're talking with all of the different clients. You're managing the expectations. You're chasing and getting new work. As the business owner, you are that center cog. Now, that enabled you to grow to a certain size and get raving fans and people to love what you do. But to move through to the systems entrepreneur, that next level, you actually need to let go and have other team members come in. But it's hard because all of the attributes that you've picked up in levels 1 and 2 have been reinforced because they've given you the result. But the problem is that it actually holds you back from growing through to that next level. I went on a side tangent. That's a discussion for another time. The final stage is the complete entrepreneur, and that's where you see businesses as a collection of systems, and you see businesses more as entities of systems that can be bought and sold and traded. But that's, again, maybe a discussion for another time. The thing I wanted to show you now, so this is Planet 13. This was the store that was on Elizabeth Street. One thing that's important to reference just here is a lesson that I learnt at Planet 13 was we had this process, right? Effectively, we thought about, right, we've got walk-in traffic, they come in here. What is the next stage in the sale for most people? We need to get them into the change room. And because getting them to the change room is one step closer to making a buying decision. Then once we get them into the change room, we get them to fall in love with the clothing, and then they end up purchasing something. So that the aim of the game of what we were retraining our sales staff is don't focus on the sale, focus on getting them in the change room. Now, one lesson that came from that is if someone walks in and picks up a Metallica t-shirt and brings it up to the front register, you don't say, oh, wait. The next stage in the process is for you to jump into the change room. No, you say, happy to take your order, and by the way, can I upsell you some stickers and patches? Like that, so you have to think, just because this is the flow, if someone jumps straight to sale and they skip past here, that's okay. This is just the general flow that most people will go through, but it's a choose your own adventure. The user will pick what makes most sense for them. Now, how does authority content play in this picture? This layers right over the top. Why? The book that you write, if you end up running an event and getting it transcribed and turning into a book, potentially could become the opt-in right up the front here, like we use at Melbourne SEO and video. It could also be some of the videos become the opt-ins for the different verticals. It could be audios. Like, it will help you in the creation of that. The content from authority content that you create will help you define your autoresponder sequence. It'll help with the positioning. Your About Us page might have photos and snippets of the videos that you've done. You'll use some of the top performing bits of content down on your blog will feed into the autoresponder sequence just here. It will help with your web positioning, make you look more like an expert because you're delivering helpful, useful content. And you'll be able to, put it on the blogs. You'll be able to put it in these deep, different pages. And when it comes to remarketing and using it as traffic sources, like we can go to social media and we'll take some of the authority content posts and we boost that on boost those posts on social media. And again, we do that thing I said, you pay to boost a bit of content, you build a list off anyone who engages in that content, and then you remarket an offer to the opt-in just here with that content. So it can also be used as the downsell here as well. So this is what I consider a complete map to do. And the reason I developed authority content was to make this as easy as possible for the business owner. Because now we can, the biggest stumbling block people have for executing this is getting the content, because they're on the tools and they're too busy and they don't create the space. So authority content was built to basically fuel this. Be the best example, depending on how we're going for time, because I did want to do a hot seat towards the end. Anything that I end up talking about, I look to be the best example of what it is that I teach. So have a look at melbourneseoservices.com and you will see we're driving different traffic sources, whether, a big part of ours, search engine optimization company, is SEO, of course. But we have, and I also do some social and we do some YouTube. We don't do as much paid for our SEO business because I think it's a little bit incongruent. Like, people want to feel like they find an SEO provider who's ranking quite well for SEO. So we don't use it there, but we use it quite heavily in the video side of the business. We also use it in the System Hub. But there's other traffic sources. So we've got traffic sources. They come into an opt-in. So the opt-in for me, I've got a few because I've developed over time. I've got the 20-point checklist. I've got the authority content book. I've got signing up for a newsletter that gives them tips on SEO and all that sort of stuff. So best example here. Then we move through to the autoresponder sequence. If you sign up and you download that free report, you will see the bonding sequence. You will also see my broadcasts over the top. and I get people to know, like, and trust me through the bonding sequence. I point them back to the site. On the site, I've built up my expert positioning, authority. I've got all of those pages we talked about. I've built out our About Us page that talks about us. I've got industry accreditation. I talk about, case studies, all that sort of stuff appears here. We've got the blog. I've built content over the time. The content lives in the autoresponder sequence as well, and I point them back to this. All of that points back to a strategy session with either myself or Melissa, who handles most of the strategy sessions these days. And then we push them down here, and I've got my product, and we've got high and low. We've got a few different products down here. We remarket over the top of them. So that's kind of, best example. So we'll probably just take maybe about 5 minutes now that we've got our one-page marketing plan, where I'd love you to put on some music up the back, and we'll just ask you some questions. And I want to go through each of these different stages and think about how you will apply this and which bits are missing. Like, that's the next thing we need to do. Once we map this out, I'll quickly show you how do we prioritize it and in what order we do it. So Steve's going to press the play button now. I'm going to just plant some hypnotic messages in your brain while you listen to the music. But just think about redrawing this on a blank piece of paper with a beginner's mind. And think about, what traffic sources have you got? What's working at the moment? What traffic sources would you like to add into the mix? So just think about the traffic sources first. Quick movers, the next thing you need to think about is your opt-in offer. Why would someone want to exchange their name and email address or even phone number if you want to do some SMS marketing? If you run a coffee shop, maybe it's a free coffee. Maybe if it's a construction business, it's the 5 things that you need to look at when selecting a renovations contractor. If you run a graphic design firm, maybe it could be something like, what would be interesting and relevant if I was looking for graphic design? I think it could be, you're probably going to know better than me, but it could be a short video on what makes modern design and how to make sure that your website doesn't look like it was designed in the 80s. What is, some of the requirements? Depends what you're designing, I suppose. Think about the conversation that is going on in the mind of the prospect prior to them making a purchasing decision. How can you create an opt-in or a reason for them to want to opt in? And then once you move through that, the next thing that you want to think about is your autoresponder sequence. And that can be just really short. Let's not actually write the emails out. What are some of the things that you would put in your autoresponder sequence? First email would be to download the opt-in. Second email might be to find out more about you. Third email might be, check out the case studies. What are those 5 emails? Even if you just want to write 3, I'll be happy with 3. No need to overachieve here. 3 is fine. 3 is better than none. Then maybe have a little bit of a think about your website. What sort of changes would you want to make to your website? Are you missing an About Us page? Do you have a listing of past clients you've worked with? Do you have blog content? Do you have, what's missing on your website at the moment? Now think about underneath your blog. What are maybe 2 or 3 bits of content you could create for your blog? What are frequently asked questions? What is it that you're asked on a regular, repeated basis? Now, does it make sense in your business to have a discovery session? Do you want to put that in? Are you going to have some sort of offer on your website to chat with a team member? And what would you call it? Is it a strategy session? Is it a chat with an expert? Is it a, help us design your plan? Is it help us cost out your project? Is it, I don't know. You're going to know better than me. And then think about your product. Just ask yourself the question, do I have a lower priced product? Maybe something that I could use as a downsell. Does that make sense? Sometimes it doesn't, sometimes it doesn't. I chatted with a gentleman during the break and he was talking about renovations and he said, oh, look, it doesn't really make much sense. Because I said to him, oh, maybe have you thought about doing, maybe a stepping stone for you could be people looking to get their windows changed or something like that. And that's a lower priced product than having to completely renovate the house. And it might be a nice way that you could market on the front end. And then he said, oh, look, smaller jobs like that tend to attract lower quality people and they tend to be more work and they tend to be squeaky wheels. So that didn't quite fit for him and that was okay. But still something to think about. It might make sense. If you can come up with a loss leader, that's what someone like Officeworks does. The reason they sell their photocopier paper at a slight loss is because people out there are shopping and comparing prices and thinking, oh wow, their paper is so cheap, and they think everything else must be cheap, and they're trying to do it to get them into the store. And even if they lose money, by the time they get in there, they're hoping then that they'll sell them pens and chairs and all these sorts of things. Once you're in Officeworks, it's hard not to buy other things. You're either an Officeworks person or a Bunnings person. When you're in Bunnings and you're walking around, you go, oh yes, I didn't think that I needed that bag of mulch, but since I'm here. So it may or may not make sense for you. And then the final, remarketing. Everybody should be doing remarketing, lowest hanging fruit. All right. So let's keep moving into the final straight now. We need to think about, how do we tie this all together? You've got what the finished product looks like. Now we need to think about how do we put this into action. The way I like to think of in what order should you do things is a framework that I call website content share. And that's really the order in which you should approach things. Fix your website first, create some content, and then start to share. That's a really good framework to go by. The reason you start with your website first is because your website's already getting traffic. You're already having people land on your traffic. So if we can convert the traffic that's getting there at a little bit better rate, then we'll see an impact on the bottom line almost immediately. So start with your website first. What conversion improvements can you make that we talked about here? Adding additional pages. Can you make it more search engine friendly? Can you increase usability? That's everything what I would start with first. Start with your website. Then you move to your content. Now the next piece I would be thinking about is your lead magnet or your opt-in magnet, whatever you want to call it. And then your autoresponder copy and then also some blogs. So for me, that is the next piece. So that way we can start to get the people who are visiting the website to then opt in so we can have the ongoing discussion with them. Now, I think depending on the size of the business and how much traffic you're getting, it may make sense to do remarketing first because that's a bit of a low-hanging fruit. If you're already getting lots of traffic, you might put that number one. But if you're not getting loads of traffic, fix your website first, get your content right, and then look at doing your remarketing after that. Once you get that in place, that's really the guts of this. Now we can start to think about traffic. How do we amp the traffic up on this? So where do you start with traffic? We'll use a little target here. So where do we start with this right now? The best, easiest traffic that you can get right now is your existing clients. So once you set your website up and you've got all of this funky stuff that I'm talking about in place, now we can send an email to our existing clients to see if they will opt in for our lead magnet. Because if we can't convert our existing clients, who are our perfect target market, to take an interest in that lead magnet, then our lead magnet is probably off. So start testing with your existing traffic first. Then what's the next ring out? The next ring out are leads. So these are people who might have already put their hand up and said, I'm interested in your products and services. So if we've exhausted all of our existing traffic, I then go to, do you have a CRM? Do you have an email database of people who are prospects but they haven't necessarily purchased? Well, let's now mail them next. Then the next best one out from that one is JV traffic, so joint venture traffic. If you know anyone in your industry who has your target market and is happy to do an endorsed mailing, or they're happy to work with you to put your message in front of their audience, that would be the next source that you go after. And you keep going until you exhaust that, and you work on each layer till you get all the way out. Now then, at this point, if you've rebuilt your website and you've exhausted these 3 levels of traffic, then you may look at paid up here. So for me, now, again, this is the way that I approach it. You have to remember my bias is that I've come from startup and we worked a lot with free organic traffic. So for me, this makes sense, and I leave paid up here. But you talk to someone else, one of the best people in AdWords in Australia is a guy called Mike Rhodes, and he believes you should start with paid because you can very quickly turn traffic on, get very quick results, and then adjust and measure. But it depends on the size of business. If you're spending $150 to get a lead and you haven't fully tracked through to know your numbers, you can burn a lot of cash very, very quickly. So you need to, if you're going to jump to paid, just remember that's going to be some of the most expensive traffic that you're going to be acquiring. And then the last one, and the reason I put it last is because, to make a point, is most people try and go for this first. Organic could be things like social media, just free organic where you're just doing time. For me, I look at that last. I think you should do all of this first because you've got the best chance of success at each one of these levels before you get to this level. Now, I've got a little bit of a bias to SEO because, we've got some systems and processes around that. So I do that earlier for clients. But if I was starting with someone fresh, they didn't have the budget, this is the process that I'd probably go through. They may need to do this a bit earlier. Again, it depends. But usually this is the order in which we try and approach things. So that might help you think with our action steps. Once we have fixed your website, improved the conversion, looked at your lead magnet, got some of that content, turned on your remarketing, now we think about how we extract that traffic. And then the last thing that we do is then we look to scale this with paid traffic. So you could start off with direct traffic first, so go to something like AdWords and try and figure out at what cost you're acquiring a lead. Now you can just buy leads, and if the numbers stack up, you can buy as many as you want. Or you can have a look at interruption-based marketing, which might be something like Facebook or YouTube or social. Just remember, interruption-based, I'm here on social media and I'm looking at what my friends did last night or the breakfast that they had this morning or, the little selfie that they did down at the beach. That's why I'm there. If you're displaying your business messages to me, you're interrupting what I'm doing. So just because it's interruption-based, that's why you want to lead with content on social media first to get the engagement and know, yes, this is the target market we want to be, running our ads to because they've engaged in our content, and then I might remarket a specific offer that gets them into the opt-in. Again, now we're kind of starting to move into scale. Once you've got your basic framework, how do we then just blow the socks off what you're doing? Now we went quite deep there. I was going to go through a hot seat where we got someone up. I think the best way for me to do it now, because we've run out a little bit of time, would be to make you an offer. If you would love to go through this with me and have me customize this for you, reach out to me through melbourneseoservices.com and we'll have a look at setting something up. I will do something special for Steve's dudes, if it feels like it's the right fit for you. Dudes and dudettes as well, by the way, so both of you. So just reach out if you want to go through and customize that to you. But that's pretty much it.